Good afternoon, everybody. Let me thank everybody for joining in on today's conference call with Deputy Secretary of Education, Cindy Marten. Until the Q&A portion, I will ask everybody to kindly turn off their cameras and mute their audio. And please note that we are recording this session. I'm Jeff Isaacson. I serve as president of the University Space Research Association. For those of you that are not familiar with USRA, we were founded by the National Academy of Sciences at the request of NASA in 1969. Today, our governance is grounded in 117 PhD granting universities, which span some 40 states in the US and 10 countries. The university members play a very important role in USRA, including establishing our bylaws, electing our board of trustees, and guiding our public policy advocacy. These conference calls are something that we do regularly. They're part of our engagement plan with universities, and they enable our university members to hear directly from prominent decision makers in Washington. Today, we're honored to have Cindy Marten speak with us. The U.S. Senate confirmed Deputy Secretary Marten on May 11th, 2021. Before joining the department, Marten served as a superintendent of the San Diego Unified School District since 2013. And in that role, the district achieved the highest graduation rate among big city districts in California and the fastest reading growth of large urban districts nationwide in 2019. Deputy Secretary Marten also spent 32 years as an educator, holding various roles of increasing responsibility as a teacher, literary specialist, vice principal, and principal. She is the author of Word Crafting, Teaching Spelling, Grades K through 6, which emphasizes literacy as a key to student success. Deputy Secretary Marten, we appreciate your efforts and we thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you so much for that really kind introduction, Dr. Isaacson, and for letting me join this distinguished group for this conversation and getting such a warm welcome. And to the whole USRA, just the invitation was really important to us. So I'm excited to be here with you today. I was ready to just jump right in with our content, but I can't help but stop at the beginning, at least to begin and acknowledge some big decisions that are coming out that are affecting education. I'll just talk about one. Yesterday, I want to acknowledge the consequential Supreme Court decision, and I have to reiterate the administration's message that our nation is stronger when our colleges and universities reflect the vast and very rich diversity of our people. You may have heard President Biden yesterday. He's calling on higher education institutions to seize the opportunities to expand access to educational opportunity for everyone. And we know that talent and creativity and hard work are everywhere across our country, and yet equal opportunity is not. And so this is why your work and your organization and the work that you all do in your own institutions for higher learning within academia, this matters so much. It matters for now, for current, and for future generations. So I'll just say on behalf of the Secretary of Education, Dr. Miguel Cardona, and the whole U.S. Department of Education and the entire Biden-Harris administration, I want to thank you all for your commitment to our nation's students. And let's move into space research and education, because this is a very important topic to us, and equity inclusion is also at the center of everything we're doing in this space. So when you look at the U.S. Space Priorities Framework that was released by the National Space Council, states that are investing in STEM education, we know that it's essential to prepare the nation's workforce so that we can fuel the economy of the future. So last year at the Department of Education, we were invited to join the National Space Council. That's not the way it had been in the past, but Vice President Harris, who chairs it, had the Department of Education, Department of Interior join the National Space Council as sitting members. And the mission of the National Space Council, you probably all know it already, but it's to preserve and promote American leadership in space and to synchronize our nation's civil and commercial and national security space activities. I always think it's important to start really big, like what is the vision? What's the National Space Council up to? What's the mission? And that mission around synchronizing the nation's civil and commercial properties and national security space activities, there's a reason for it. It's so that America can continue to use space to improve the lives of people in our nation and throughout our world. So it was an honor for me to participate, continues to be so, to participate in the National Space Council. And at the September Space Council meeting, Vice President Harris chaired the meeting, and she identified the 3 essential priorities to that mission. First, expanding our STEM workforce. Second, addressing the climate crisis, and third, promoting international rules and norms that will govern space activities. She was very clear, 3 key essential priorities that are part of the Space Council mission. And since I was joining and representing the Department of Education at that meeting in September, Vice President Harris, during the meeting, directed the Department of Education to increase pathways for STEM and space careers. We take this responsibility and this charge very seriously. And that's why we're really eager to work with all of you, our higher education colleagues, so we can support the research that's needed, the training that's necessary, and what it's going to take to create a diverse workforce that will enter space and be ready for the STEM careers that we know we need now and in the future. So then I tie all that big picture work at the federal level and think about the work of USRA. I'm really grateful because you are the ones that can create the advocacy. You can push for innovation in research, technology, and education programs that are directly aligned to that mission that I just laid out. For me, you heard a little bit in my bio or my intro, I've been in education for 33 years. I was a teacher for 17 years in a classroom. I was a vice principal, a principal, and then most recently, before becoming deputy secretary, I was a superintendent of San Diego Unified School District, which is the second largest district in the state of California. We had 100,000 students, 16,000 staff, and a $1.2 billion budget. And so now I'm in my 3rd year as deputy secretary, and I'm honored to do this work because I bring all of my years of experience and what I've lived through and led through. I've led through leadership transitions, policy changes, lean budget years, and you name it. I've either been a teacher, a principal, or superintendent during those times. And yet I believe that what we're facing right now in this moment is probably the most consequential period in our lifetime as it relates to education. I don't say that lightly. As our nation's education systems are continuing to recover and rebuild and reimagine after this pandemic, I think we have very precious, time-limited opportunities to respond to what our students need and what our educators are needing and what do they need now to learn and to thrive in this very rapidly changing and uncertain world. And so I think it's a critical moment, and I think it's a time where we can generate knowledge, we can stand up research, we can look at the promising practices that end up resulting in more inclusion, more access, more equity in our schools and our institutions of higher education. It's such a consequential time. And so I really appreciate the focus and the work that your community is doing, because I'm very aware of the reciprocal relationship between research and practice and how they can inform each other and improve each other and drive towards the outcomes and the visions that we want so much for our country. So, as a lifelong educator, I've watched firsthand and been a part of the ways in which research can help transform teaching and learning, and it can change lives for the better. And we need this research now more than we ever have before. That's the way we unlock the potential and the genius that lies within every learner, no matter who they are, no matter where they are. And in fact, I believe that we do have the research and the skills and the passionate educators that we need so that we can deliver on the hope and promise. We're just not doing it every day for every child in every school in every city across the country. We're doing it for some students in some schools in some cities in some states across the country. And so that's why you'll hear us at the Department of Education talk about how we've been learning and listening to the field. We talk directly to a lot of you, exploring the truly profound implications of space and STEM research for our students. We're looking at what is it going to take? What kinds of opportunities do our students need to grow, learn, succeed, and thrive? And what do our educators need to do their best work? And so when we're putting together policy pieces and leadership moves that we make at the federal level, we turn to the science of learning and development, which is a body of research that clearly explains and demonstrates what the essential elements are to educate a student so that they can excel. We already know this. There's a science to teaching and learning. As much as it's a craft and an art, there's a science to it. What do students need? The science of learning and development makes it clear. Students need strong relationships in and out of school. They need safe and welcoming environments. They need rich learning experiences. When you weave those together, that's how they reach their full potential. And so the good news is we can do this. We can design the kinds of environments and education systems that deliver on what the science of learning says students need to thrive and to learn. And so I think, the fact is that for any student to truly benefit from their education so they can develop the 21st century skills that are needed, that give them the success and financial independence that they need in America, they need something very simple. They have to be able to learn within schools and other environments that are filled with a deep and irrefutable sense of safety and belonging inside the academic rigor and instruction that happens so that they can live their best lives and become contributing members of our communities. When students know that they belong, when they know that they're valued, then their full brain power can be directed at the learning and the academic rigor that enables them to succeed. So when we see science, technology, engineering, math, or STEM, like we call it, when teachers know that they belong in the STEM profession, just like students know they belong, guess what? They stay in the profession. When we're really clear that we need more, not less teachers in STEM, and when we invest in our STEM education workforce so they can develop their knowledge and their craft, then they continue to inspire the next generation of students to reach for their personal best. And some of the most inspiring stories are students talking to me about how a teacher helped them see themselves in STEM, and that teacher's been supported so that they can then support their students. So I think that one of the things we focus on here is creating that sense of belonging in all learning environments, but particularly in STEM. That's what helps fuel the long-term systemic changes that I know that we need. And that's why the department's committed. We ensure that every student in America, from pre-K through higher education, every STEM educator knows without question, without reservation. Our initiative is called You Belong in STEM. And we want to make sure we have the message that students and educators across the country receive that clear message that you belong in STEM. And so we're going to take the singular opportunity that we have now to do what's never been accomplished before while we redesign STEM education and to permanently rewrite the narratives about who belongs and who can succeed in STEM education and jobs. And so we can work to create all of the learning environments that we need, but to support all students and educators to know and achieve their potential for learning, we have 3 key goals in the You Belong in STEM initiative. It's pretty simple. First, ensure all students from pre-K to higher ed have an opportunity and the support so they can excel in rigorous, relevant, and joyful STEM learning. Second, because we know that excellent academics outcomes are built on excellent teaching and learning delivered by excellent educators. The second goal is around developing and supporting our STEM educators so they can join, grow, and stay in the STEM field. And we focus on equity and diversity. And then lastly, we are leveraging the historic investments that we see right now, from the American Rescue Plan to the CHIPS and Science Act to the Inflation Reduction Act. The goal is to leverage those fundings to support strategic, sufficient, long-term investment in STEM education. This isn't a quick fix or a silver bullet. This is long-term commitment and investment. So with this initiative of You Belong in STEM, we're going to not only redesign and support systems to redesign their systems and learning spaces, but to rewrite these narratives about who belongs, like I said before. I think that you'll see it's very much in alignment with a lot of the work that you believe in. And then we've teamed up with something I know you're passionate about, is our partnership with NASA to exemplify that we have a shared commitment to engage students in STEM. And NASA's Artemis space mission is committed to the same thing around belonging, putting the first woman and person of color on the moon. We've teamed up with NASA, and we plan to demonstrate the need to inspire and provide role models. So students, if you can see it, you can be it, to create the next generation of STEM professionals. In that partnership with NASA, we also have a same focus on inclusion and diversity and engaging those that are not traditionally represented in the STEM profession. And we're also highlighting the value of public-private interagency work and relationships so that we can take these opportunities to scale. That's an MOU that we just signed with NASA, and it reiterates our collective focus on building the nation's skilled and technical workforce. So when you see Ed and NASA, the Department of Education and NASA collaborating and working together on a host and range of programs, it spans from elementary to secondary to post-secondary education, and it's focused on outreach particularly to underrepresented communities. So some examples: we're partnering with NASA to support the 21st Century Community Learning Centers. That's meant to deliver high-quality engineering challenges and educator professional development. And it also, that program has NASA mentors for middle school students and after-school programs. Another example is we're piloting an opportunity with our Office of Post-Secondary Education and NASA's Minority University Research and Education Project. And that's working to introduce NASA research through experiments and simulations to STEM college majors. And then another example is Ed's Office of Career Technical and Adult Education, that's here at the Department of Ed, launched our own Your Place in Space Challenge, and that's intended to provide engaging learning opportunities for students to explore super exciting space missions. And that's going to launch the forthcoming CubeSat Challenge, which is going to provide students with the opportunity to build the technical skills for careers in space and beyond. So we know we have a further opportunity to drive impact, become force multipliers in getting this work done on space education and deliver on careers, just like the Vice President charged as a key mission of the National Space Council. And so I'll just say, to whatever extent you all can, we ask you to join us in the effort. We know we can't do it alone. Intentional collaboration is how the best things ever get done in sustainable, long-term, durable ways. That's how we create the content, and we put forth challenges that will advance space education for the Artemis generation. And so I just have to thank everybody that joined the call. I want to thank you for your efforts in this area. You're helping us show what it looks like to create rigorous, well-rounded, joyful learning opportunities in space, in STEM, and beyond for students everywhere. I think, like I said, it's a pivotal time in our education system overall, and specifically in STEM education. And I think it's possible for us to deliver on the power and the promise of research and practice when we coordinate all the way pre-K through 12th grade, through adult systems, to higher education institutions and workforce partners. When you create that synchrony, we're able to establish the multiple pathways that are needed for all students to access college and careers and become the contributing members of the future economies and communities that we care so much about. And so I'm just going to end with the words from Vice President Harris when she said the importance of protecting space exploration and research. She said, we have only just begun our journey into space. Space remains a place of undiscovered and unrealized opportunity. Our responsibility is to work together to guide humanity forward into this new frontier and to make real the incredible potential of space for all people, from our very own Vice President. So it's been a pleasure to speak with you today, and I thank you for this opportunity.
Deputy Secretary Marten, thank you so much. Quite uplifting. We really appreciate that. I'm going to ask Eric Hammond to moderate the Q&A session. Eric is USRA's Director of Corporate and Government Affairs. Eric?
Thanks so much, Jeff. So if you have a question, please use the raise your hand feature on the reactions tab at the top of the window. We will do our best to call on you. Once you are called upon, please unmute yourself and ask your question. Please be sure to keep your questions brief to ensure that as many people can ask as many questions as possible. So at this time, I'd like to turn to Professor Joan Ramage from Lehigh University to ask the first question. Joan serves as Vice Chair of the USRA Council of Institutions. Joan?
Thank you so much, Eric, and thank you so much, Secretary Marten, for joining us today and sharing this important relationship. You touched on the importance of teachers and on belonging, so thank you for that. I'm wondering how you envision this partnership improving or influencing how we inspire and train current and future STEM and space educators and maybe administrators in all school districts, and how will we identify progress? I think you're muted.
Yes, thank you for the question. The reason why we launched the You Belong in STEM initiative is to answer that very question. You all know, or I assume you know, maybe I can explain it, but the federal government does not have local control over local curriculum and decision making. Those are all local school boards, and as they should be. Those are local decisions, and communities know most what they care about. But what we do is leverage with our funding streams, with our convening authorities, with our guidance and our technical assistance and models of great practice, we can lift up and show where do we have the right examples? Where do we have the best bright spots of belonging in terms of teachers feel like they belong and they've been invested in or poured into, and they have the opportunity to feel supported by their local school district. So I just completed a eight city tour where I'm lifting up some examples. And when we do that, we're lifting up key examples. We put them into our best practices clearinghouse. We're showing how people are leveraging their local, state, and most importantly to us, the federal dollars with this once in a generation opportunity to show what does it actually look like to create these systems of belonging. And, I'm finding the communities that have invested maybe in a small scale before the pandemic to an after school program or a summer program or a teacher collaborative program, but they never took it to scale and there wasn't sustainable funding for it. What we see is people have done a lot more of that because there has been an influx of funding. And so once people see it, they can't unsee it. Once they learn it, they can't unlearn it. Once a system has built itself to build STEM and belonging into the DNA of its entire system, they're going to want to keep funding it. But we have to leverage this current moment to be able to do, proof points that people are looking for, because there are some people that need to see it to believe it. Scientists understand the scientific method, and you can make a hypothesis like, I'm not quite sure if this will work, and you test a theory. We need to be able to show some people need to see it, and that's what we're building across the country now.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joan. So I'd now like to turn to Professor Sullivan to ask a question. Please turn your camera on and unmute yourself.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Deputy Secretary. You basically said everything that needs to be said, and I guess I'm just blown away that you said it in a concise fashion, because at New Mexico State, we're trying to stand up a STEM Plus Center of Excellence. And the challenge we're having is when we talk about the science of teaching and learning, elected officials get very confused. And they start thinking about, you're going to look at a new program, you're going to stand up something. And it comes right down to, so what is it you're really trying to do? And I think my question is, how do we better articulate to elected officials the importance of teaching and learning from a science to understand how to scale? And it's not this magic instant program that you're going to stand up because they're used to programmatic things that they see and do, but they don't understand the science behind connecting everything. So how do we better shape our message?
Oh, I love this question. I'm born. You're like, are you my soul sister or what? We're born for this question, because it's really, there's not a sound bite here. There's not a silver bullet. I've said recently at one of my talks about, we're not going to buy our way out of this pandemic. Everybody's looking for the quick fix that, okay, well, what program should we buy? And is there a kit for science of learning? No, it's not a kit. This is an investment in key principles of learning. So what does an active learning classroom look like? You have to show it. So this is what I meant when I said you have to see it to believe it. I would, when you bring elected officials into your learning spaces and you show students building robotics, we went into a space the other day where they were using the 3D printers and coding, and they were studying literacy. I think it was second or third graders, maybe first graders. Maybe it was first graders. Anyway, they were doing the 3 little pigs. And they were redesigning, I'm going to huff and I'm going to puff and I'm going to blow your house down. Who can build a better house that won't get blown down, using scientific principles of engineering and building something? When you can actually see that, you do need a narrator. So I invite people into your learning spaces, show them the learning that's happening, but connect it to, we're not just teaching, engineering and math concepts. Look at the students, how they're engaged with each other. Look at the collaboration. Look at how students have a sense of safety and belonging. You have to look at the whole of what the school is creating. And sometimes we just need expert narrators describing the learning environment and tie it back to the science of learning and development. And I mean, one of the things that I see also works really well is everybody is looking for the quick fix. They're looking for the solution. And when you start by saying, we know what to do, we've done it before. We've done it for some kids, some days, in some places, sometimes. And if you want to see examples, I'll show you. And the degree to which we haven't isn't because we don't know how. When you tell anybody, elected, appointed, teacher, and that we know how, and if it's not yet happening, I mean, think about it, tie it to the medical field. If I was talking to a group of pediatricians, there are sadly some childhood cancers that do not have cures. And pediatricians have to sit down with the family and say, this is a terminal illness. We don't know what to do. That is not true in education. In education, the children who walk through our doors from whatever kind of struggle or background they may or may not have, we see bilingualism, multilingualism as a superpower. We see the strength in their diversity and what they're bringing into the classroom. But you have to recast the narratives that say some are going to college and some are scientists and some are going here, and you start sorting people to say, how do you unlock the genius that lies within each learner? And you pique people's attention when you say, we know how. If you want to learn, let us show you. And then you can like back into the science of learning and development and say, there's core principles here, and here's the blue wheel, and here's how it's all broken down. Like you get back into it, but they glaze over if you just get too technical too quickly. So this is where I continue to use my teaching credential that I taught kindergarten, and if I could teach kindergarten, then I could teach people on the Hill. Because I have to teach what we're doing, why we're doing it, how we're doing it. The science is there. If we know what to do, why aren't we doing it?
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. And we spent some time in New Mexico. That was one of the schools I visited. It was a Santa Fe Indian school, and I went to the Paul Duke High School and focused on STEM learning when I was there. Actually, incredible example. Was that Mecca? I think Mecca's on the call. Is that where I went, Mecca? Or am I mixing up two places?
Definitely the Santa Fe Indian School, and then also we were on Santa Fe public schools as well.
Oh yeah, Paul Duke was a different city. That was Atlanta. Never mind. See, I mix them up, but we definitely saw some great examples there. And so the highlights of our tour is also another way that you can help people understand what we're trying to teach across the country.
Thanks so much. I see Professor Hargrove, you have your hand raised. Would you like to ask a question?
Yes, thank you, sir, and thank you, Deputy Secretary. My name is Keith Hargrove, and I serve as provost at Tuskegee University, nationally known as a STEM producer. However, one of my concerns is the production of underrepresented groups with PhDs in STEM. There was a time when industry recognized that, federal laboratories recognized that, as well as federal funding agencies like NSF recognize that the production of PhDs of minority or underrepresented groups directly and indirectly impacted that pipeline. However, what I have seen, and maybe that was back in the day, but today, and I would predict maybe as a result of yesterday, I'm a little more concerned. My question is, how do we get those entities, corporate America, federal laboratories, along with NSF and Department of Education, to make a greater investment as well as collaboratively make that investment in producing U.S.-born and underrepresented groups to pursue PhDs in STEM fields?
Well, I will humbly submit that it begins with the initiative that we launched here. Our You Belong in STEM initiative gets kids interested at a very young age. I'm talking preschool, doing robotics. They're programming those little bee robots. And when kids have this interest at a very young age, they grow up and they self-select into the STEM fields and they go into the colleges. Now you have to do kind of top down and bottom up, because your point is, okay, if we get them interested, but then the field doesn't want them in the institutions, and I mean, what just happened with affirmative action can create even more challenge. But we have to have the models at the top that are saying we want more students in these fields, and we have to have the students being produced that say, and this is what I want to do. This is the kind of science I'm involved in. This is what I care about. This is how I want to change the world, and I'm a scientist that's going to do it. So I think it's like top down, bottom up at the same time, and then meet in the middle on it. I also think that our MOU with NASA makes a clear statement that inside our MOU, inside all of our funding streams and learning opportunities that we're creating here across government, has at the heart of all of it an equity agenda. President Biden had executive orders from day one about equity being embedded into everything that we do across government. And so more PhDs from more diverse people, women and people of color, is what we want, not less. And we need to intentionally create those pathways where that happens.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Secretary Marten, we certainly want to be mindful of your time. Would you have a moment for one last question?
Yes, I would. But I also want to make sure I introduce Mecca Smith from our team and Amanda Miller. Mecca is with the Office of the Deputy Secretary and my partner in all of this work. There's Mecca. And then Amanda Miller is our Deputy Assistant Secretary for Higher Education Programs from our office, for our OPE office, so post-secondary education. So Amanda can talk a little bit more about insight into funding. Mecca is just my partner in all of this, figuring out how to be really systemic and intentional about this. And I know, Mecca, you were smiling at that last question because that's like everything we're working on solving every day, but happy to take another question.
Thanks so much. So I see Professor Pierce has his hand raised as well.
Hi, I'm Brad Pierce at the University of Wisconsin, and I'd like to follow up on some of your discussion with the NASA partnership. It sounded like that was primarily NASA from a space exploration perspective, but NASA also does a lot of Earth observing. And how much are you reaching out on the Earth observing side? Because I think, you know, STEM and the next generation of STEM scientists are going to be critical for solving a lot of the climate change issues that we have, and NASA's quite involved in that.
Yes, I think I kind of highlighted that as the MOU because of the Artemis Space Mission partnership, and that is definitely space focused, and that gets a lot of attention. But we're going beyond that. And in fact, Vice President Harris was very intentional when she expanded the National Space Council. It didn't used to be that the Department of Education or the Department of Interior used to not be members of the National Space Council. And Vice President Harris and this administration changed that and put, I think there was more than just these two, but those are the two that I remember and pertinent to your question. The fact that the Department of the Interior is on the National Space Council is exactly to your question. From space, we need to observe Earth and figure out what's happening with climate change. And the scientists that we're creating in our classrooms and in our STEM programs are not just to figure out who's going to the moon. Like that's the moonshot fun idea, but there's layers of that in terms of the classroom exploration. And we just went to last week, about a week ago, Vice President Harrison and I went to Denver, Colorado, to highlight it specifically climate change with a group of student climate activists, and they had passed their first climate action plan for Denver public schools. It was all led by students. So it's a key part of the policy pillars that the Vice President's office is leading. And you can lead that at the federal level, but if you don't produce graduates that are going to go into that field, what are you doing it for? And so our whole goal is to stand up the workforce ready to work in those fields. And so the NASA MOU isn't just limited to space. That's just the one that gets all the headlines all the time. I'm glad you put a highlight on it, though.
Thank you.
Well, Secretary Marten, on behalf of USRA, I'd just like to thank you and your team for taking the time to speak with us today. We really appreciate that. And we'll bring this session to a close. I'd like to thank everybody for attending. And I wish you all a wonderful weekend and a joyous Independence Day.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, everybody. Thanks for the opportunity. Bye-bye.